Welcome to the 100 Club podcast. I'm your host, Michael Moy.
Jackson Carter.
We're so glad that you have joined us today. On today's episode, we've talked to Tanner Easley. He's the magnificent Director of Sales and Marketing at the Village at the Triangle. It's a community that focuses on independent living, memory care, and assisted living out in Austin, Texas. And in my opinion, I think we learned a lot today.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of things just to kind of tantalize you. One, we learned more about appropriate follow-up steps. Tanner did a great job of reiterating the importance of culture and team, both for the sales team themselves as well as the greater community within. We also learned that we have lots of room for improvement on podcasts, mostly centered around brevity of questions and on-camera appearance. So beyond all of that, I think we have quite a bit to contribute. I think you're going to really enjoy the next however many minutes this ends up being. Without further ado, here's Tanner Easley and us.
Enjoy. We're honored to have you on our first ever podcast.
Inaugural podcast.
Yeah. So no pressure for everyone around, but Tanner, I would love to open up the floor to you. Just learn more about you, yourself, maybe some background, and just to get the conversation started.
Sure. So I actually started in the senior living industry about 12 years ago in Dallas, Texas. I really jumped into it right after college. You know, I graduated in the Great Recession with a lot of people looking for jobs, looking for that next step. And senior living was presented to me, and I thought it might be a good fit. I started at a community in Dallas that really had about 260 independent living apartments, was really struggling occupancy wise. We were actually labeled, the 10 worst occupied properties in our portfolio. So it was like tough times when I started. And I knew that I really had to strive to do as best as I could to fill that community. I worked hand in hand with a sales specialist for really the first 6 months where she is amazing. I still keep in touch with her to this day, teaching me those sales basics, how to follow up appropriately. And together, for the first 6 months, and then after, when we actually had a director join with us, filled the community, graduated from that target 10 list. And, the rest is history. It's a great team there. And from that was promoted to several other communities, got some experience in assisted living, memory care, and then made my way to Austin, back to independent living only, kind of graduated from that community to doing new development in the Georgetown area, and then circled back to RCM to start here at the Village at the Triangle, which opened officially September of 2018. I was the first person hired here in 2017 and really was here a full year before the doors opened, doing pre-sales and really selling blue sky, selling the dream of what this community was going to be like and the culture that it was going to have. And people responded really well to it. And then now that we're here and have been open for really a little more than 3 years, we have done that. We are fully occupied in all different areas, independent living, assisted living, and memory care with a very healthy wait list. So it's been really just the most thrilling part of my job to see that dream being presented and then to see it full of people and life and culture. So.
I personally am curious on, you said specifically following up appropriately. I would love to get just kind of an insider look of what Tanner's follow-up playlist looks like. So, and take that however you want, right? So people coming in from inquiries, maybe different lead sources, maybe talk about some strategies on some best follow-up practices that you found to be successful. And maybe talk about some nuances that you've seen as the industry has progressed, because you've had a great amount of experience. And so share just a little bit about that.
Sure. I would say, when I started not too long ago, really the bread and butter of follow-up was phone calls. We're making calls, smile and dial is what some people say. You just kind of pick up the phone and call to get those follow-ups. Obviously, follow-ups after tours, but then for those new inquiries, really making sure to have that phone connection immediately and scheduling that next step, that tour, and then following up after tours as well. In this day and age, I do think it's changed. People, I usually on every tour ask our prospects how they would prefer to be communicated with. And you'll be surprised. Some people say phone calls, some people, it's email, others text messages, but really not being afraid to use any of those avenues to set the next step, schedule the tour, and then to follow up appropriately after that tour. So it definitely has changed. I find myself emailing and texting a lot more than originally with those phone calls, but those phone calls are magic when you are able to build rapport before they ever get here, and then to continue that rapport building after a tour. That's really where it's at, and they remember you better. I think when you have those phone calls. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think at the end of the day, the prospects and families really respect the fact that you're asking them and being considerate on how they want to be communicated with, because like you said, I mean, everyone's so different, likes to communicate in different ways. And ultimately you're setting up stronger rapport opportunities and meeting them where they're at, as opposed to doing a communication method that you might enjoy.
I get, for lack of a better term, you succeed, like you did it. The whole purpose of the podcast is how are people getting to 100% occupancy? What are the things that are different? What makes one person different than another? If you've had years here, you got somebody off the bottom 10 list, which is always great. It's a good goal. What's special? How do you attribute this to, I work with a great company versus what is it that Tanner's got figured out that maybe other people need to be clued into?
I really think that success is all about the team on the ground, like boots on the ground, really. I can sell the idea of what we do. And really, there's a great Zig Ziglar quote, and I can't remember it exactly, but it's about transferring excitement. And I believe in that, really where you're, as a salesperson, you're getting people excited about what the product that you are providing. And I think the only way to really do that is to have a team in place, from the top to the bottom, that is also a part of that excitement. Whether that is saying hello on a tour, to a follow-up call the next day with your executive director, all of those small pieces play a really big part. A clean community, a warm greeting. There's just so many small pieces that I have found that your tours are going to notice, and they'll comment how that is different from other communities that they have visited. Now, do you hit a home run every tour? Absolutely not. But I think that's where you take that feedback from families and make changes and coach and make sure that everyone's on board with that vision and that culture that we're trying to emulate here at the Triangle.
Yeah, so that leads into perfectly the next question, which I'm glad that you were touching on, but culture. I think culture gets both a good rap and a bad rap. I think a lot of people are talking about culture. I think not that many are actually executing on it really well. And so I'm curious, I mean, you guys, you've sustained 100% occupancy. You're talking about getting a level of excitement across your leadership team and the necessity of that. So from a sales director that sells, and I probably should have asked you just levels of care, if you don't mind, just kind of going into like what you're currently selling. I believe it's full care, so independent, memory care, and assisted, for, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. That is correct.
But just kind of walk through, like, what is your stand-up? Like, what are you doing during stand-up? What are you doing to build that rapport with your leadership team to get them past it's not my job to do, tours. That's not my role. So how do you build that?
We really talk oftentimes that the sales department is the revenue builder of the community, and we all are salespeople. We do an orientation with all of our new team members that we're all salespeople in different ways, and that every single person that walks through the front door is also a customer. Whether that's a UPS delivery man to someone at the loading dock, a mover, bringing in furniture. Every single person that we come in contact with is an opportunity to sell the community. So we really, try to drive that home from, the beginning, from their first day here on the job, and then continue that training. It's not always that someone picks that up and knows from the beginning, this is how to put that into practice. So we're constantly coaching our concierge team. Maybe you could have said it this way or done it this way. This is what we expect when someone walks in. You can't just expect it all to be pure gold from the get-go. The beautiful thing is we were able to really build that culture from the start. We knew what we wanted coming into it. We were able to really sit down with our department heads before it got started to say, this is the vision of that. And then really to make sure that that vision continued on, because it can get really lost in translation. Sometimes you're moving in, over 90 people in the first, 30, 60 days. And everyone's at their wit's end at that point. So it's really just making sure that we're continually going back to, why we're here and the goal of building that culture. And then just the team in general, it's all about every department head owning their department and really, knowing that they're the person at the top that really would trickle down to everyone else that is, having regular interactions with our residents and families.
Yeah. What are RCM doing in terms of investing in providing resources to you guys? Because I know it can't be just done at the community level. It has to be from a 30,000 foot view looking down, and how can we operationally put these guys in the best position possible to win?
Most definitely. And I think, RCM, one of the things that I love about them is that they are there for support 24/7. They're ready to support us. They're ready to help be our biggest cheerleaders to achieve our goals. But also they allow for a level of autonomy to know that each different community is different. It's, a different clientele to a different customer attraction. And, based on that, allow the people in the community to make some of those decisions for themselves. They're like, here's the basics. Here's the bones of the operation, as you will. Now take it and grow with it as you can. And I love that about them. I've been a part of these larger corporations where it feels like you're just a number and you're a part of this big rolling machine. And I think that RCM, what I love is that, they're a phone call away anytime you need them, and they allow you to really spread your wings and make magic here, at the community level.
One question I have, and you said this in your first, kind of when you were talking about yourself, that when you were doing over a year of pre-sale for this community, it was very much selling the dream, which, we all hear, and I think is pretty much the only way you can sell before you have a community. But what I was going to ask is, what's different about pre-sales versus having an established community, whether it's, your 40-year-old community you started with, or even now? I mean, 4 years ago, you were pre-selling this community. Now you're trying to encourage people to stay. Because I know this is a long question. The culture is very important of greeting people warmly, how were you making up for that when there weren't a lot of residents walking around talking about how wonderful it was to live there, when it was just you guys? What's different? What kind of tactics do you employ that maybe you kind of back off on once you have residents?
I think it's a lot of the same things, to be honest. It's hard when you're doing pre-sales because you're talking a lot about other communities in RCM portfolio, like what they have done and how they have made this work in their community. So there's a lot of typically, this is what it would look like.
Right.
Typically, this is what we've done in other communities. I think I wore the word typically out at all my presentations, but, and then, there's still ways to build culture and relationships, even when you don't have a community to do it in. So we would do regular luncheons, regular get-togethers, where anyone on our wait list could come and get to know their neighbors before they ever were neighbors. And that, and really talking to them, that core group of new residents about to move in, that they're the ones that get to fill in the gaps. They get to build that calendar of programs and events once we open. They get to have input for, these different factors of our community. So, and I think that is very exciting for people. They get to feel like they're on the ground floor and get to really launch with us this new opening. So, and then once you're here, once you're open, this is how it is, and this is how we do things. And they can firsthand meet a resident on a tour or enjoy a meal in the restaurant. So it's much different. It's actually a lot easier because you can just say, well, come and experience it for yourself. Right. Versus let me try to talk through that with you.
Right. Let me try to paint a picture of how it works other places. And then it's gonna work the same here, except you're gonna get to have input.
So maybe speak to people on how to run effective luncheons in collaborating with them, and then also informing of other residents, because you're talking about older adults that sometimes might not be so willing to participate in new resident lunches. So just walk me through that.
Yeah, so I have done a little bit of new luncheons for new people coming in, but I've also been a part of communities where they threw big events every month and had about 50 to 60 people that attended. And really you would leave those events and feel like, well, what did I actually accomplish during that? I didn't really have a one-on-one conversation with anybody. Now I think for pre-sales, it works really well because the stage is yours. You are really selling the entire time. We invite them for a nice lunch, and then let me get up and talk for over an hour about what it's going to be like to live here, how to join our wait list. So it was pure magic, and we would attract over 60 people every luncheon we did it for almost 8 months, of new prospects coming in. So it was really pure magic. Now, in another community that I was at, we did luncheons or parties like that, and we've quickly figured out it was such a waste of time. You couldn't have one-on-one conversations. People would kind of, ebb and flow with your residents, which I think is great, but you never got to have those next step conversations with people at those larger events. So we really started to downsize those. Maybe 10 people would come to a private dining experience and then add in our residents as well. So, not to sound self-centered, but we wanted to make it all about us, how do we sell ourselves, have those good conversations, learn about the people across the table from us on a smaller scale. And that's where we called them kind of like lunch and learns, or, different topics of those where you come in, learn about the community and experience lunch and get to ask questions, but also talk to a few residents firsthand and get to know their experiences as well. And that worked great. I had residents selling apartments for me left and right. They would say, well, who cares what so-and-so thinks, you're making this decision on your own. And it was beautiful, really just get to sit back and watch them sell the community for yourself. Now you have to pick the right residents to do that. But, I find once you have an established community, those smaller scale luncheons is really a perfect solution for, to have good, meaningful conversation with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So just a quick piggyback off of that question, just finding the best resident to do a program of like this, of, resident ambassador, however you want to coin it. But do you guys have any type of referral programs, incentives to encourage people to become resident ambassadors?
We have what we call the Village Vanguards, and it's really for people to be almost an orientation guide when they get here, to invite them to that first meal. Now, we're not paying residents to come to those luncheons, but just really asking them if they're interested in it. And a lot of them are very much interested in it, to get to talk to these people and tell them their own experience. And we do have a very nice resident referral program that for residents to refer friends and family to come and live with us. And then we do, pay them a referral bonus for that once the resident moves in. And that's where a lot of our, new leads come from, and actual move-ins come from. I think the best person to refer is a resident that lives here, to tell them exactly how life is like. So,
from a sales perspective, there's always this discussion of, you should marry events with keeping residents happy, with using residents, developing referrals there, with developing a culture and a community and trying to make this a welcoming thing. But it's really nice to hear how those things are working together. And I appreciate hearing, to be super specific, I think it's interesting, the idea of scaling down lunches after the fact. So we have these big ones when we want to talk to 60 or 70 people, but we can't continue to do 60 or 70 person when we're trying to actually have conversations or actually move something forward.
But in terms of the industry as a whole, you've had a lot of experience. You've been to different companies, different providers, obviously are hyper successful at what you do. So out of curiosity, if you had the opportunity to talk to every other person in your seat, what would you say to them? And then maybe give them a piece of advice on things that maybe they should stop doing.
Oh, that's good. I think as a salesperson, our biggest job is to listen to the people in front of us, and respond. They're in sometimes a crisis mode. They're trying to figure out, a very, sometimes terrible situation, sometimes not. They're just really wanting, for an independent person, just more socialization. But usually there's always that small thing that has caused them to come and look at options. And I think as a salesperson, I know many salespeople that just talk you to death and, never are silent and allow you to really learn anything about the person standing in front of you. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned as a salesperson is just to really shut my mouth as much as possible to give back the information that they're looking for. And then just really to be a resource to them, a solution driver. That, these are the issues that this person is experiencing, and this is how I can help you in that. But I do think a lot of salespeople don't do that. They are just, steamrolling, talking, showing them things that aren't appropriate to show them. And then really terrible follow-up after that, where they never call them, they never reach back out. And I think that it's a constant reminder in any sales position as to why we're here, what our goals are. And, we can get distracted really easily. So get back to the basics of, moving people in and building revenue for your community.
I really appreciate your time. I also really appreciate, and I'm saying this as an ambassador to the 100% podcast, but you got a good one for the first time. Who seems
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, this was great. I learned a lot here.
Yeah,
I don't even run a single.
But now you could.
Yeah, I totally could.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun to talk about and kind of just remember all that has occurred over the last 12 years. I do think in the future going forward, the biggest challenge that any community is going to have is attracting care, and attracting employees. And I think that's something that, as a whole, we're going to have to really come to grips with and figure out the best way to do that. Which I know that there's a lot of people thinking that through, but I think the people that work here, that's the people that we need to figure out, how to attract and keep. And we've been able to do that here. I know a lot of other places have not been able to. So, but I think that's the challenge going forward.
Well, man, I don't know if there's a bigger cliffhanger that you could possibly leave us with, but I feel bad that your phone has probably rang 6 times since our interview. So, well, it's honestly a testament to what you're doing.
It's a great sign. We just feel bad for keeping you from work.
So again, Tanner, thank you so much. Thank you for doing the inaugural kickoff. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we can stay in touch and meet one day.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.